chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. For there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. Thank you. You may be seated. In Romans chapter 13, it begins with Paul saying, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. Period. Okay, now it goes on to explain why and how and some other reasons. But right there in that very first line, it sums it up nicely. How we should have, what our attitude should be toward our authority. It says, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. Now, it uses the word soul for a reason. It means every one of us. Every single person. You might notice that the Catholic Church, they have their own authority. And they say, no, 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 no. We have the Vatican City, we have the Pope, we have our own powers, and those powers must not be subject to the authorities of the government. And they have in times past had their own empire, their own nation, their own Holy Roman Empire, the HRE, it was called. And the Pope would demand that kings come and prostrate themselves before them. Come and bow and kneel before the Pope. Come and kiss his ring. But here it says, let every soul, every single one, the Pope, the priests, the cardinals, the bishops, every single soul, every single person alive in this earth, this world, should be subject unto the higher powers. Okay? So that's the who that needs to be subjected. That's every soul. We, every single one of us, must be subject unto the higher powers. So who are the higher powers? So in the church, who is the higher power? Well, besides God, of course. But in the church is the pastor. And who is the higher power in the home? It's dad. It's the father. Okay, sometimes I've seen it where it says, God is the leader of this home. Not my home. Should not be in your home. It's the father. And then the father needs to be subject to God. Okay, so it's not that God is not leader in the home, but it's that there is accountability that the father has. So the father cannot say, well, it's really God. If something's wrong in the home, well, the breakdown is with God. No, if the home breaks down, the breakdown happens because of the father. He is the higher power in the home. In a relationship, in a family, it's the husband, it's the father. That is where the accountability is. Those are the higher powers. And chapter 13 is specifically talking about the powers, the higher powers that are the government. So there are three institutions, that is the church, the family, and the government. And ultimately, of course, the father, the president, and the pastor, the heads of those institutions, they, of course, those three must submit themselves to the higher power, which is God. And they have accountability that they must do it. And as far as it goes for the government, sometimes we can see that there are wicked husbands. And what do wives need to do when they have a wicked husband? Now ultimately we cannot sin against God. Okay, that's implied in this and it's explained further in this chapter. We are always to obey God rather than man. But when the powers that be, the higher powers here, when they make a command, when they pass a law, when it's a husband telling his wife, or a father telling his children, or a pastor telling his congregation, his members, or a president telling his citizens, these higher powers, if they are not in violation to Scripture, if they are telling you to do something and it is not a sin, must we obey? Here it says, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. Here the answer is yes. So if a wife has a no-good, drunkard husband, and he says, go make me a sandwich, and he does not say it in a nice way, he says it in a mean way, go make me a sandwich, what should she do? She should make him a sandwich. Yeah. Loudly or quietly? Quietly. Right? If a wife has a husband who is a drunkard, the Bible says that let him win her husband over by the conversation of the wives. The conversation. That's the walk of the wife. Her attitude, her faithfulness to God, her actions. It's not big mahinga and yelling at him. It's not henpecking him to death. It's talking about if you have a no good, dirty, rotten, drunkard, lost, unsaved husband, you're going to win him how? By letting him see what a godly woman you are. It's not by nagging him into Christianity. Okay? If a child has a no good, dirty, rotten father, and the father says to the child, you cannot play with your friends, because I'm a dirty father and I want you to stay home and do work for me. For no reason. Something that I should do, I'm going to make you do it for me because I'm lazy. What should that child do? Isaiah, what do you think? If I tell you to do something, and even though it's not a sin for you to do it, I should be the one to do it. Something I'm supposed to do, but because I'm dirty, rotten, lazy, stinking, no good fat man, and I tell you to do it, what should you do? Right, you got to do it. Okay? And if you have a lousy father or a lousy husband, you should pray for them that God would work on their heart. But guess what? You are not going to work on that person's heart by disobeying. Because that's not God's plan. That's not God's way. That's not God's will. The higher powers, we are to be subject to them. So you say, wow, the ladies are all thinking, well, it's not bad being the king of the house, huh? And the children are thinking, wow, it's not bad to be the dad. Sure stinks being the child. It sure stinks being the wife. Well, guess what? The dads have to be subject to God. We have our own powers that we need to be subject to as well. And guess what? We have our powers that we need to be subject to, which is the government. Okay? So we see that each one of us have powers that we are to be subject to, submissive to. So the family, and then there's the church, that's the pastor. So let's say that the pastor says, I want anyone who's doing a special number, I don't want there to be any contemporary rock beat in that song. And you say, but this is a really nice song. You've got to subject yourself to the power that is in the church. That's the pastor. And then we come to the government. The government passes a lot of bad laws. And there are some very bad people in the government. But let me tell you something. There's some bad pastors, and there's some bad husbands, and there are some bad fathers. But the attitude and the requirement for obedience is the same. And that is we must subject, we must obey the powers. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. You can say, but the president is a bad guy. You have to obey the president. The president is a good guy. I'd love to obey him. It doesn't matter if he's good or bad. We must obey our authorities. If the authorities say you have to pay your taxes, you pay your taxes. If they say your tax rate is this high, even though it's too high, then you have to pay it anyway. So, every soul must be subject unto the higher powers. Unless they tell you to sin, well, you cannot sin, because then you are breaking the highest power, which is God. If the commandment is not to sin, you must comply. You must obey. So even though they passed new laws, and I noticed in the Philippines, because it is a socialist country, and your president is a socialist, and your senators are all socialists, you pass laws about every 5 minutes. Foolish laws, stupid laws, ignorant laws, bad laws. But we must follow them anyway. because they are there because they are ordained of God. Every single one of these corrupt senators that are running for Senate and corrupt congressmen that are running for Congress, every single one of them, even though they are corrupt, if they win that election and they are put there in that seat of power, they are ordained of God. It's not about the person. It's about the position that they are in. Presidents, they come and go. Senators, they come and go. Congressmen, they come and go. It's not about that person, because they're pretty much all bad. It's about the position that they are in. That is the position of authority that we must obey. I did enjoy, a couple days ago, on my way to school, I take Tagalog classes now. On the way to class, I saw 2 huge garbage trucks. The big garbage trucks, not the little kind. The big garbage trucks, 2 of them. And they had about, I don't know, maybe 20 employees. And these employees were taking down signs, banners, posters, signboards, billboards, everything of politicians, and they were taking it down and they were throwing it into the garbage truck. And guess what? They were filling up both of these garbage trucks. From all the pictures of Marcos and Bong and Go and Go and Bongo and Go Bongo and Bongo Go. All these guys, they're taking their beautiful pictures and they were throwing them into garbage trucks. Thousands and probably millions of pesos of banners and ads, all being thrown into the garbage. And it said, Kamalek. And a big banner posted that says, Kamalek, Commission of Elections, was doing it. Because they were violating their own laws. So it's the law that must be obeyed. It's not the person. It's not about the person in the office. It's about the office. So even when the president or the senator or the congressman, even when they violate the law themselves, they as a person are subject unto the powers. Okay? So even though the laws might be foolish and the president and the senators and the congressmen might be bad, guess what? They're bad in every country. They're not a special case. They're bad in America too. We still must submit ourselves to the powers that be. It says, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. So they are there because God has ordained them to be there. Okay, verse 2, whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. Now that's not talking, and there are other times, that is not talking about hell. It doesn't mean if you commit the sin, you're going to go to hell. Because there are Christians that do commit the sin of disobeying their civil government. Disobeying their government, not paying their taxes, not obeying the traffic laws, not obeying the employment laws, not obeying... There's so many laws that it's ridiculous. But that does not mean that we have the right to disobey just because the law is a bad law. In fact, it's not only in our obedience to the law. I'm going to read to you Ecclesiastes 10, verse 20. It says, curse not the king. No, not in thy thought. You hear that? It's saying, not only are you to obey the king or the president, you are not to curse him. Okay, so if the president is a keynote, we are not to curse the president. You might say, he's a bad president. Don't curse him. Okay, fine. But with every fiber of my being, every thought in my head, I will curse him but say nothing. Here it says in Ecclesiastes 10:20, don't even do it in your thought. Don't even have hatred in your heart. Even you will not disobey. I will not disobey the law, but I have the freedom of speech to curse that king. The Bible says, don't do it. Don't disobey. Don't curse with your mouth. Don't even think wicked thoughts to the king. So whether the president is good or bad, even in your thought life, it ought to be, Lord, you have put him there. He is ordained to be there in that office for this time. And I'm going to tell you that governments around the world do a pretty good job at being representative governments. There's anomalies, there's times where that's not the case, but generally speaking, governments in my perception, as I've seen it, do a pretty good job of being representative of the people. Okay? For example, if you see across the world, Catholic countries are poor. They're poor. They don't do a good job of being governments. Philippines is a Catholic country. It's a poor country. It has a bad government. It's a representative government. If you go to Brazil, a Catholic country, it's poor. Go to Suriname, it's a Catholic country. It's poor. Go to Mexico, it's a Catholic country. It's poor. Catholic countries are poor, and their governments are bad because the government is a representation of the population, of the citizens in that country. So if you say Philippines has a bad government, it's like saying the citizens in the Philippines are bad. And you'd be right. If you say the American government is bad, it's because the people in that country are bad. So you would say it's a representative government. So if you take the average, normal, everyday Filipino, and you make him the president, you're pretty much going to get the same thing that what you have already. It's not going to be much different. So in other words, if you have a people that fear the Lord and seek His face, you're going to get a bad government. If you have a people that is against God and hates God, you're going to get a government like Saudi Arabia. You're going to get a government that is against its own people, that hurts its own people. It's representative, that's my point. So you say, God, why did you allow this person to be the president or the king or whatever they want to call themselves, the prime minister, whatever? God, why did you allow that person to have this authority? You know the answer? It's not because, it's not necessarily the fault of those leaders. It's because of the people that those leaders represent. So when you say, why are they so wicked? It's because you are wicked. Because the people are wicked. In fact, it says, I forgot the exact reference, but it says, if my people that are called by my name shall humble themselves and seek my face, then what will God do? Then He'll heal their land. So specifically, who is it that's causing God's land, the land not to be healed? It's God's people called by God's name. So if you want to be specific, why is the government so wicked? It's because the Christians in that nation are wicked in heart. So if you really want to point fingers, where are you going to point? You're going to have to point at yourself. So you cannot say, God, I'm not going to obey the government because they're so wicked. Well, they are wicked because the people in that nation are wicked. And they are there because they are a representative of a wicked people. So if you have bad leaders, it's because you got bad people living in that town. You got a bad mayor, you must have a bunch of bad people in that city. Corrupt mayor, corrupt city. Representative. And guess what? They're there because they are ordained by God. Why did God ordain them? Because the people are themselves also wicked. Alright? Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. Verse 3, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. So quickly here, it's saying, hey, look, if you're a cell phone snatcher, if you're a bank robber, if you're a murderer, if you're a drug pusher, do you think those people are afraid of the government? What do you think? If you're a drug pusher today in the Philippines, 2019, are you going to be afraid of the government? I think you are. Okay, there's a lot of drug pushers floating down the Pasig River because the government caught up with them. So, the government is a terror. Normally not because of you doing your good works. Now that does happen. Because Christians are against sodomy, because Christians are against separation of church and state, they might be persecuted, they might be killed. But generally, a lot of the reasons that Christians use, I'm not going to submit myself to the government. They're a wicked government. Well, that government is the same government that keeps you safe and keeps your property safe. So be careful when you say, because of righteousness, I will stand up in defiance of the government. I'm going to overthrow the government. Don't do it. Don't support those that would overthrow the government. Why? They are there because they are ordained of God. And a lot of times, the reason why we want to take over and change the government, let's overthrow the government, let's change the government. What is it? It's because we want someone like us to take over that they might have the power. It's not our job. That's not the job of the Christian or a citizen to take over the authority and the government so that people like us can rule. It doesn't matter who rules. The ones that rule are the ones that are ordained by God. We should live our Christian life peaceably, quietly, that we might serve God. Not that we might be rebellious against the authorities that are protecting you and your property. Okay, so when you say, government is corrupt, senators are all corrupt, I agree, and I say the same thing, they're all corrupt. But at the same time, they do keep you safe. You are all alive here today, right? You're all pretty safe here today, right? You all felt comfortable that you're not going to be killed coming to church today, and I think you are all comfortable that you will stay alive on your way home too. And that's because the government helps to keep us safe. So be careful when you say something bad about the government. It's easy to see the wicked things that they do. I look at the MRT. Oh, it's so obvious, the corruption with the MRT. All that money going in there and nothing goes to maintain it. They cannot even maintain it. They built it and spent billions on it to build it, and they cannot even spend a few $100,000 or a few small millions to maintain it because the government has to put it in their pocket. It's wicked, and I see it. But you know what? I don't want to curse, even in my thoughts. Those politicians, why? Because they are there. Because they represent people that is wicked. That's us, by the way. And they are there because God has ordained them to be there. Verse number 4, for he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger, to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. A lot of people do complain about Duterte because what does he show forth? What does he carry? He carries forth a sword. Not literally a gun, you might say the police with their guns, right? That's the sword. The police comes and he has a gun, that's the sword. Okay? You should confuse when it says sword. He's talking about a policeman with a gun pointed at you. That's the sword. And here, the Bible says, that is what the government is supposed to do. That's when the government is doing a good job. Let me read it again. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. Who is the he? King. Very good. But if thou do that which is evil, like drug pushers, be afraid. Afraid of whom? Evil. Good. The one that has the sword, as we're going to find out, the king. For he beareth not the sword in vain. That means he has a sword, and he's walking around with his sword. It's not just for show. It's not just for looks. Traditionally, not anymore, but before, what did the king have on him? On his side. He carried with him his sword. Do you think the king, an old man, do you think he's ever going to get his sword and get in a sword fight? No, he's too old. He's an old man. But what did that sword represent? Authority. The power to kill. The power to kill. The power to destroy. And so here, Paul is saying, the king, when he has that sword in his hand, it's not just a symbol. It's not just in vain. It's not for nothing. He has that sword because he has the power to kill with that sword. So if you're doing evil, you should be afraid. He does not carry that sword just for looks. Okay, now a more modern idea is what in America we call the football. Has anyone heard that before? Football. The president's football. Okay, now, you've heard of American football, right? Football is kind of shaped like this. Okay? University of Michigan is the best football team in the land. Always has been, always will be. Amen and amen. So they have the American president, he has with him at all times. When he's in the bathroom, when he's sleeping at night, he has with him when he has meetings, there always will be a designated person very close next to him that has a box, a suitcase. In it is a football, they call it. And that is the nuclear launch codes. That means that any time during a meeting or in the middle of the night, even when he's in the CR, even when he's taking a shower, there is someone nearby with that code that can say, Mr. President, we are under a nuclear attack. You need to launch the nuclear missiles. He can open it, only number that he knows, and guess what happens? Those missiles will be launched. He doesn't carry that in vain. In other words, he has the power to launch nuclear missiles and to wipe out complete civilizations. Nations could be wiped off the face of the earth. That much power. He just needs to push the buttons. In fact, they just recently released some of the numbers, the codes that former presidents have had. And guess what? I don't know if it was Kennedy or Reagan, but one of the former presidents of the United States, it said that his launch code was 00000000. Okay, so it's a good thing some Secret Service guy did not get in there. Some bodyguard said, 00, I just tested 0000. Real launch. Okay, so he carries the sword, or the policeman's gun, or the nuclear launch code, the football. Be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God. Who is the he? That's the king. Okay, that's the president, Duterte. And it says, this is his job. He is a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. What is the job of the king? Is to kill bad guys. Is to kill evildoers. Not to slap them, not to rehabilitate them, not to give them therapy or mental assistance. His job is to take that sword and to execute wrath upon those that would do evil. So you might say, oh, this problem with drug pushers, they just need someone to understand them. They just need a mother to love them. They never had a father that understood them. That's not the government's job. He's the minister of God to execute wrath with a sword. So you may say, I don't like it when he kills bad guys. That's what the Bible says. The job is to execute wrath. Not to understand, not to help them with their feelings. It's to execute wrath. And he does that as a minister of God. So even when we see that the government is killing people, killing drug pushers, killing those that would do evil, and we say, oh, he just has too much wrath. I don't like it. It makes me nervous. That's his job. That's his job. In America, we call it pearl clutching. Do you know what that is, or not really? Pearl clutching. It's got the idea of a bunch of high society ladies. And all these high society social ladies are there at a dinner party. Okay? For the rich, powerful dinner party. And together, when they talk, they say, oh, have you heard? Why? He's killing drug pushers. And then they clutch their pearls. Oh! 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 Like that. They clutch their pearls. And sometimes we are pearl clutching. Oh, no! Terrible! That's a job, folks. Is to do something that's not pleasant. It's not pretty. That's what they're supposed to do. They're the ministers of God to execute wrath. Sometimes I clutch my pearls too. Oh no! Poor man! Poor man! He's just a 19-year-old baby. You're killing babies. He's just a little baby, 19-year-old baby. He's 19-year-old, he ain't a baby. Alright, so let's continue. I just want to get one more point here. Wherefore, verse 5, ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. In other words, God's saying, Paul is saying, don't do this because of the punishment. Okay, don't be honest in your taxes because you're afraid Len is going to start knocking on your door. Okay, don't be afraid. I'll be honest in my taxes because of the consequences. Reason. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Don't say, I'm not going to rob a bank because I might get caught and I might die in a shootout. Don't refrain. Don't stop yourself from robbing a bank because you might die in a shootout. Don't rob a bank because it's the right thing to do. Alright, verse 6. For this cause, pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Okay? Pay your taxes. Don't cheat and lie. They take your money and it just goes into some fat cat, corrupt politician. Pay your taxes. And be quiet. Just do it. Right, Len? Pay your taxes, guys. Jesus said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. You know what Caesar was doing with that money? He was killing Christians with some of that money. He was taking some of that money and using it to feed Christians to lions. And what did Jesus say? Don't worry how the government spends their money. You pay your taxes. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Okay? Verse 6, for this cause pay ye tribute, also as taxes, by the way. For they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Verse 7, render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. It means pay your taxes. Pay your taxes. Okay? Don't cheat. Don't bribe. Don't steal. Follow the law. Pay your taxes. Alright. One more quick point. Verse 8. Owe no man anything, but to love one another. For he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. I'm going to tell all of you something right now. Okay? And that is, Christians should not be making utang to each other. Okay? But you might say, well, that means I can never lend anyone money. Let me explain. It says when you have fulfilled the law is when you love someone. That's fulfilling the law. Okay? So, if a brother, not a lost person, lend them money and charge them 100% interest, that's fine. But when a brother or sister here in this church comes to you with a need and says, I have this need. I have my Vienna was hit by a flying chandelier, ceiling fan. And later we find out it's the daughter. Whatever, the daughter, the Vienna, whatever. I have a need. Can you help me with the need? It is unrighteous, it is against this verse to say, yes, I will give you a loan. You will pay me back. With interest. Don't charge interest. But here's what I'm telling you. If someone says, I have a need, and you say, okay, I will give you a loan. Don't give them a loan. If you need to be paid back, then you should not be loaning the money out. So if someone comes to you with a need, as a brother or sister, specifically in this church, and they say, I have a need, you should say, okay, I will give you money on this condition. Here's the only condition. You pay me back if you want to. If you don't want to pay me back, our relationship is still intact. Our fellowship is still good. You are friends with me. I am friends with you. If you don't pay me back, we still get along just fine. If you want to pay me back, it's okay. If you don't, it's still okay. If it's not okay that they pay you back, that they don't pay you back, then don't loan them the money. If it's okay they never pay you back, then okay, give them the loan. It should not be a loan. There should be no utang among brothers and sisters in the church. It should all be out of love. Okay, so I'm making a declaration right now to all of you who have utang to me. You are forgiven. And guess what? None of you have utang to me. Alright? So if you do come to me for utang, or if I come to you for utang, or if you go to each other for utang, there should be no utang in the church. It should be, I will give this out of love. If you pay me back, fine. If you don't pay me back, it's fine. And you, as the one that would be giving, someone comes to you for utang, and someone says, can I utang from you? And you really need that money. You need it for rent, you need it for your medicine, whatever. You better not be loaning it out. Because if they don't pay you back, that's going to damage your fellowship. You only loan out what you don't ever have to have in return. In other words, I'll do it because I love you. Now here's the type of love that we should have. That you would lay down your life for that person. So in other words, you say, this is the last 100 pesos I have. And I'm going to buy it for medicine to keep me alive. But my brother over there wants a Jollibee sandwich. I'm going to give my last 100 pesos to that person so they can eat at Jollibee, and then I don't have money for medicine, and I will die. And that should be okay. Why? Because out of love, you give, with nothing expected in return. That's how we should have utang towards each other. It should be out of love. Someone comes and says, hey, can I have money? If it's going to bother your relationship, then don't give out the money. Because you should say, I don't ever need you to pay me back. Our fellowship, our relationship is still the same whether you pay me back or not. That's utang among believers. That's the way it should be. And if you cannot give out that money, and that's the truth, that whether they pay you back and they don't pay you back, it's still fine, then don't give it out in the first place. You're only going to destroy your relationship with that person. So don't be giving loans. You can give money out of love. Don't say, you must pay me back. Of course, don't charge interest. That's nonsense. You need to give some. If someone asks money and they really need it, and you feel like you should give it to them, give it out of love. Without any expectation to get it back. Hey, oh no man, anything else. Anything. But to love one another. Alright? I have utang to you. It's love. You have utang to me. I only request that you love me, and you request that I love you. Okay, so if it doesn't mean you can't give money to each other, but if you want to go to someone and ask them for money, that's fine. If they say no, it should be fine. And if they say yes and you never pay them back, that should be fine. And if they give you money and you decide to pay them back, you are paying them back not to satisfy your utang. You are paying them back because you love them. For the same reason they gave you money in the first place. That's how you do utang among believers in the church. All of anything but to love one another. That is the utang that you have for each other. It's love. Alright? How are we to handle our authority? Obey them. Subject yourselves to them. And if you want to get very specific for a very down-to-earth application, pay your taxes. Follow the law, pay your taxes. That's the number one sticking point people have. I don't want to pay my taxes. They're wicked, they're evil, they're corrupt. Pay your taxes.